Salvete omnes! Today we are continuing our trip through the Nāvigātiō with chapter 22, the Column of Crystal. Quadam vero die, cum celebrasint missas, so on a certain day, having celebrated masses, a column, apparuit illis in mare, appeared to them in the sea. Et non longe ab illis videbatur, sed non poterant ante 3 dies appropinquare. And it did not appear afar off from them, but they were not able to approach it before 3 days. Meaning they saw it, but then it took them 3 full days to reach it. Cum autem appropinquasit vir Dei, aspiciebat sumitatum irius. So the man of God, having had approached it, he was looking for the top of it, tamen minime potuit prae altitudine irius. But he was not able to see it because of its height. Namque altio erat quam aer, for it was taller than the air. Poro, quae perta fuit ex raro conopeo. Further, it was covered, or had been covered, out of a rare canopy, or here a rare canopy means it's not thick, it's maybe like a net, where it's very sparse. In tantum raris ut erat, ut navis posset transire per foramina irius, and it was so rare that a ship could pass through one of its openings, or pass through its openings, plural there. Ignorabant de qua creatura factus esset conopeos, they did not know out of which created thing, or by which creature, this canopy had been made. Habebat cororum argente, it had the color of silver, sed tamen durio iris videbatur quam marmor, but it also appeared to them harder than marble. Columna erat de Crystallō clarissimo, the column was of extremely clear crystal. So, some commentators see this as an iceberg. I disagree with that interpretation because we're told that it's harder than marble, and we're also told that they don't know, like the column seems unknown to them of what it is, and they'd surely know what an iceberg is. They're sailors who have been going around the northern Atlantic for several years at this point. Dixit Sanctus Brendanus fratribus suis. So St. Brendan said to his brothers, Mitite remiges intus in navem. So put the oars inside of the ship, et arborum atque vera. And also they're going to take down the mast and the sails, et alii teneant ex vobis interum fibulae conopei. And other things that we'll have out of you while between the ribs of the canopy. Basically, they're taking down all of the things in their boat that would prevent them from fitting through this canopy. So they put the oars in, then take down the mast and the sails. I have a little note here. Fibula can mean clasp, rib, buckle, connection, bond, fetter. But ribs makes the most sense as the translation. Moving on. Spatium namque magnum tenebant paradictus sagus a columna. And the aforesaid sage was holding a great distance from the column, quasi unius miriadii, about a mile, et ita extendebantur in profundum. So this sentence seems a little unclear to me what they're getting at here. It seems that the Praedictus Sagus is St. Brendan, who's keeping the boat about a mile from the column. And we're told that thus it was extended into the deep. So perhaps the column goes down a mile into the deep, and perhaps Brendan can see that it goes a mile down in the deep because he's a mile away from the column. And we're told that the sea is very clear at this point. We move on. Cum haec fecisit aetat iros vir Dei, With these things having been done, the man of God said to them, Mitite navimentus per aliquod foramen, so send the ship inside through some opening, ut vereamus diligenter magnarie creatores nostri, that we may see diligently the great things, the magnalia, the great works of our Creator. If you look here in the print edition, I give some interpretation that perhaps this is referencing the 3 days of Christ in the grave, where like they see paradise as represented by this column from afar off, but it takes them 3 days to get there, the 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. And what happens once they get there, they put in the oars, the tools of burden on the boat, and they also take down the cross because they no longer need it. They've reached the destination. So I think that might symbolize perhaps the end of the suffering of the church at the end of the eschaton or something like that. Things to think about. Cum intuus intrasent et aspixisent huc atque illuc. So having had entered inside and having looked here and there, mare apparuit iris vitrium prae claritate, the sea appeared to them like glass because of its clarity. Ita ut omnia quae subtus erant posset videre. Thus, so that everything which was underneath they could see, or they could see everything that was underneath. This is also similar to the book of Revelation, where there's a sea of glass beneath the throne of God. Nam bases columnae potererant considerare, for they were able to consider the base or bases of the column. Et sumitatum conepii similariter jacintum in terra, and the farthest reaches, I think is the best translation of sumitatum, of the canopy similarly lying in the earth. So they look down at the sea, they're able to see the column go to the ground, and they can see that this canopy also is anchored on the ground beneath the water. Lux solis non minor erat intus quam foris. So the light of the sun was not less inside than outside. Tunc sanctus Brendanus minstrabat foramen, unum inter quatuor conopeos, quatuor cubitis in omnem partem. Then St. Brendan was measuring the opening, one between the four canopies, quatuor cubitis in omnem partem. So it seems what he's getting to here is that the supports of the canopy are 4 cubits by 4 cubits. I'm imagining like a kind of mesh thing supporting this, but it's very unclear how this canopy relates to the column. Igitur navigabant per totum diem juxta latus unum irius columnae. Therefore, they were sailing through the whole day next to the side, one side of the column. Et semper umbram solis et carorum potererent sentire ultra. And they were always able to sense the they're always able to feel, I think the best way to gloss it is they were always able to feel the heat of the sun even in the shade. Otherwise, you'd have to say that, well, what they're sensing is the shadow of the sun and the heat beyond. But I don't think that makes as much sense. I think it makes more context to fit it with this verse where the light doesn't diminish because the crystal's like that clear. Ita usque ad orum nonum, thus until the 9th hour. Sic et ipse virtei semper menserabat latus unum. Thus, the man of God himself, was always measuring one side. Mire quadrangis cubitis mensura una per latera ilius columna erat. So it's 1,400 cubits on one side of this column, which is around 2,000 feet. Sic per quatreduanum operabatur venerabilis pater interquatur angulos praedictae turis. So thus, for a span of 4 days, the Venerable Father was working amongst the 4 corners of the aforesaid tower. So it takes them 1 day to travel the length of the tower, that 2,000 feet. Perhaps they're so slow in sailing because he's measuring it as they go along. Quarto autem die invenerunt calicum de genere conopei et patenum de colore columnae, iacintes in quoidum fenestra in latere columnae contra austrum. So on the 4th day, however, they found a chalice of the same type of the canopy and a paten or shallow dish of the color of the column. So they find basically like communion or Eucharistical vessels made out of the same thing as the column, lying in a certain window in the side of the column facing ostrum, which is south. Quae statum vascula Sanctus Brendanus apprehendit dicens. St. Brendan apprehended, which vessel St. Brendan apprehended at once, saying, Dominus noster Jesus Christus ostendit nobis hoc miraculum. So our Lord Jesus Christ showed us this miracle, et ut ostendatur multis ad credendum mihi dedet ista bina munera. And so that it may be shown to many for belief, for the purposes of belief, he gave to me these 2 treasures. So he takes the chalice and the paten, the shallow plate. I did do an internet search to see if there's any other sources that mention these 2 things, because it specifically says that they're going to show them to other people. And I couldn't find any like monastery in Ireland that claimed to have these as relics, unfortunately. Statum praecipit virdei fratribus divinum officium per agere, postea corpora reficere. So immediately, the man of God ordered the brothers to carry out the divine office, so they're going to celebrate the Eucharist now, and afterwards to refresh the body, because they had nothing of tedium of taking up food or drink after they had seen that column. My interpretation on this is they had no tiredness requiring them to take food or drink after they had seen the column. It seems like this is like the smell of the island coming off the island of grapes that like refreshes them. They don't need to eat. I think being in the presence of the column is having the same effect. At least that's how I read that sentence. Transacta vero illa nocte, quae perunt fratres navigare contra septentrionem. So having spent that night, the brothers began to sail against the north. Cum altrem transierunt quorum foramen, and having passed out of a certain opening in the canopy, posuerunt arborum et vela in altum, they put up the mast and the sails up high, et alii tenebant ex fratribus, and others out of the brothers were holding the ribs of the canopy, quosque omnia praeparassent in nave, while those were preparing everything in the ship. So some people are like holding on to the canopy, while other people like to stabilize the boat, while other people like raise up the mast and the sails and things. Extensis veris, coepet prospera ventus post idos flare. So having extended the sails, a prosperous wind began to blow past them or behind them. Ita ut nihil illis opus fuiset navigare, so that there was no work to them to row, or alternatively, it wasn't necessary for them to row or to sail in the sea, tantum timere funiculos et gubernum, except only to hold the ropes, like to stabilize the sails and the rudder. Sic ferebantur per 8 dies navicula contra Aquilona. And thus they were carried, the boat was carried um, for 8 days against the north. Aquilonum north. So that's the end of the incident with the crystal column. Let's talk a little bit about interpretation. Because the next chapter, they see the entrance to hell. So first off, they see this Insula Fabrorum, the island of smiths, which have these like cyclopean demon creatures. And then the next island past that's a volcano that's the literal entrance to hell. So I think it makes sense to interpret this crystal column as kind of being like the heavenly city in the book of Revelation, where it's, it's square in nature. It's made out of crystal. It's very clear. It's reminiscent of the Crystal Sea. And there's also this miraculous presence of the Eucharist, of God, in the column. And we even know that, like, this has to be very miraculous because they sail around the whole thing, the whole column, so they get back to where they had started. And then they found the chalice and the plate. And obviously they would have seen it when they started, so it must have appeared while they were going around and measuring the thing. Also, the very act of measuring it is a callback to the book of Revelation, when an angel gives John a cubit and tells him to measure the heavenly city. So I think that's what the crystal column symbolizes here. And I'll see you in the next video to discuss the Island of the Smiths.